And I wanted to draw your attention to this one. Fellowship Bible Church is a very large church that's over sort of on the edge of Cool Springs, Brentwood. And this article came out in the Tennessean in December. But a family that they were being sued, almost $38 million. There was a young boy who was in the nursery, and a 3-year-old young boy, and he was taken to the bathroom by a teenager who was in there volunteering with his mother, and the teenager sexually assaulted him. The teenager was one that his mother, trusted him. He never just exhibited any kind of this issue or concern that she would have had for letting him volunteer with her in the nursery, and then second, letting him take this young boy to the bathroom. But it happened. On top of what happened, when the parents of the young boy figured out that it happened, they approached the church leadership about it, and the church leadership then tried to hide it. Okay? And so this article talks about that story and so on. I've not heard an update recently, maybe some of you have, but I do know that the young boy was volunteering in the nursery with his mother. And so the article is in there. And we'll talk a little bit more about the processes when we talk about It's More Than Safe Sanctuaries. The other article that's in there is this article called The Franklin Youth Minister's Wife Faces Statutory Rape Charges. And this church is right down the street from my house. It's actually not far from here. And the young lady was a young couple in their 20s. And she was serving alongside her husband in the youth ministry. And she developed a relationship with a 17-year-old boy in the ministry. And I think from friends who are friends with him, the youth minister circle in Franklin is pretty tight. We all know each other, and so one of my friends knows him very well. And she actually decided to disclose to her husband that this was happening at the same time that it was being disclosed to the kid's family. So I don't know if there was something that there was like an agreement. They were both going to tell about it. So anyway, she was arrested. She was charged with statutory rape. And they are still. He is still working at the church. He moved out of youth ministry for a while, and they have tried to go through marriage counseling. Again, I haven't had an update. So these are two different stories of where we didn't think that this would happen to us. Okay, I'm sure that Fellowship Bible Church, they didn't think it would happen to them. Franklin Christian Church never thought it would happen to them, but both of them have had these situations. And so that's the part of the idea about this, It's More Than Safe Sanctuaries. We have to understand that it can happen anywhere. Okay? And the other thing, so talking along this and just tools that are in here, February was Teen Dating Violence Month. And this is a picture. It's very small. You'll be able to look at it on your computer and blow it up. But Walt Mueller, who is a cultural researcher, he has a web site called the Center for Parent and Youth Understanding, cpyu.org, and he's looking at cultural trends and how to help parents navigate culture and so on. But he shared this on Facebook this morning, and it's an infographic about teen violence and dating. Okay? And this is something that you ought to print off and hang up in your youth room. Because every one of your teenagers who are dating are at risk for violence to happen. And we should be the safest place for these kind of talks to happen. But we're often the last place for these kind of talks to happen. Because we're afraid of talking about these kind of issues. But if we're going to create an environment that's safe, if we're going to create an environment where our kids feel safe, then these are the kind of issues that we have to have out there. Because if you look at these statistics that are on there, when you can look at it closer, you're going to see this pretty much affects everybody. It can potentially affect every child, every person in our youth group. So that's a tool that's in there. Okay? All right. So we'll share you this, and this cohort drive, and then you're going to have some incredible access to some great documents, great pieces from us. Okay. All right. Let's do this. All right. On your table, there's a handout. Do you want to go ahead and pass that out? I'll say to you too that if you're wanting a more detailed training, and a training that would give you certification, if you need continuing ed credit and so on, I'm the lead trainer for Healthy Boundaries and Sexual Ethics for the conference, and we have that training is coming up April 29th. From 9:30 to 9 to, what is it, Julie? 9 to 4? 9 to 4. Yeah. It's at Forest Hills. You need to go on and register. And so anyone that's under appointment or whether they're a licensed local, certified lay minister, going through licensing school, elder, deacon, anyone that's under an appointment, there's a stating rule that you have to have this Healthy Boundaries, Sexual Ethics full day training. And so that's April 29th. It's at Forest Hills United Methodist Church. And then on Saturday, April 30th, is a full day of Safe Sanctuary training. Okay? April 30th is the same time frame, 9 to 4, at Forest Hills United Methodist in Brentwood. That's the Safe Sanctuary training. And that one will focus on how to write a policy, how to help your churches live out the policy, and so on. Okay? So April 29th, Healthy Boundaries. April 30th, Safe Sanctuaries. All right. So we're going to talk about this concept of it's more than Safe Sanctuaries. Because I do the Healthy Boundaries side, but I do a lot of training in Safe Sanctuaries too. And so I want you to think about in this training that oftentimes we focus on what it is that we're trying to do. And this is going to drive me crazy if I don't fix this. Thank you. What it is that we're trying to do, this concept of trying to what are the things that we have to do to keep ourselves safe? Then we also talk about the how do we do those things? Okay? But we don't ever talk about why. And one of the things that Patty Smith and I have tried to do in the time that we began doing these trainings is really focus in on why this matters. Because when it was first sort of put into our conference, it was in response, it was always there, but the first really hard push of it was in response to an incident at one of our camps, that we had to do something more. And so it was a reactive situation as opposed to being proactive. And it became a preventative step, where it's like, we had this happen, now we got to do something. And so Patty and I have tried to turn the focus to where it's a proactive stance. We're talking about what is at the heart of it and so on. But before we do that, this is probably one of the funniest videos I've seen that talks about this concept. And I'll probably mess with this multiple times, so you just need to tell me to stop. So,
stop.
All right, thank you. So let's watch this video.
What are you going to do to me? This is the worst day of Sunday school ever. I don't know what to do.
Okay, all right.
You're a freak.
Once you start, okay, listen to me.
Don't touch!
Sorry.
Stop! Don't touch me there. This is my no-no square. It's really a rectangle. But nothing rhymes with rectangle.
So this is a video from a series they call Little Billy, and you can go on Skit Guys and find it. And it's a lot longer video than that. But we often think about Safe Sanctuaries as that, about Don't touch me there. This is my no-no square. It's always about sexual abuse or some kind of a preventative of that. But the reality is, I don't believe that you can just teach safe sanctuaries and say you got it covered. Because if it's just about safe sanctuaries, that's just a set of rules, right? And that mom who brought her teenage son there knew the rules. That church knew the rules. That youth ministry whose spouse had an affair in a relationship with a 17-year-old knew the rules of safe sanctuaries. And so there had to be something more. And if we're honest, if we look at this picture right here, I Googled youth minister mugshots, and this is what I got. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot more than these. That's just what my screen capture could do. And this guy over here that says, real men love Jesus, but yet he's in a mugshot, it's like, I'd like to talk to him about changing his shirt, first of all. But I'd also like to talk to them and say, I wonder how many of these people that are in these mugshots would actually be predators, because there's a difference, or would they be wanderers who made a mistake and went too far and didn't know how to come back from that step that they had taken. Because there's a difference. A predator is one who's seeking out for this to happen from the start. A wanderer is someone who, for whatever reason, has crossed the line and didn't realize they were there, or they started to realize it happened and then they didn't know how to get back. And so both of them knew the rules of safe sanctuaries. One chose to violate those rules. The other one, because of grayness and situations that were placed in front of them, whether it was a lack of numbers, of just adults that are in the room, a lack of training, or a lack of personal health, spiritual health, made the choice to step over. Thought it was easier to step over than it was to say no and step back. Because there's spiritual battles that happen there too. You can see the young woman in the middle there. That's the spouse. And if her husband thought she was a predator, he wouldn't have asked for a reconciliation and counseling and so on. But he realized with her, and so did the church, that she had this spiritual battle going on. She wasn't healthy. Her boundaries had been violated by herself and by others and other things that were happening. And so we have to think beyond just safe sanctuaries, because that is the why of it. And if we're honest, it comes down deeper to that. How many of you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Right? We've all been trained in this and so on. If we think about it, at the core of who we are, just above the things that we need to stay alive, food, water, sleep, is safety. At the core of who we are, we want to be safe. We want to be safe. And if we're honest, if we're not addressing this issue of safety, then we're causing issues for the people who would come to our church, but also those who are in our church. And I think Stephanie will agree with me that oftentimes people will make judgments whether to volunteer in your youth ministry, by how safe they think it is. If they don't think it's a safe place to serve, because they've seen things happening, or they've seen sort of a lax of attitude around certain issues, because that's at the core of who they are, they're not going to say, oh yeah, I'll go serve and safe and be part of that. It's not safe. They're not going to do it. So we have to address that. People staying at your church are going to come in those first few Sundays as they visit. They're going to come in, especially if they're a parent. They're going to come in and start to feel whether or not they feel safe there or not. They're going to make judgments about whether or not they want their child in childcare, or whether they want their child in Sunday school or in your youth group. Gary?
Predators will also make decisions about whether they want to attack that particular church, exactly, according to how you're not going to see.
Exactly right. Predators, and they're out there. They're coming, checking, just like those new families are, new people are. They're coming in and making judgments based upon how easy is it for me to step into this space and have a chance at what I want to do here. Okay? So we have to be aware of that. I think it's actually in this Thriving Youth Ministry book that you guys have. this concept of growls. We all hunger for these 6 things, okay? And so I'm going to go through them quickly. We all hunger for grace. We make mistakes, and we want to have forgiveness. Okay, and I'm sorry, there's so. We hunger for relationships. We were created by God to be in relationship with God, and that's the core part of who we are. We hunger for ownership. We want to have things that are ours. We hunger for worth. We want to know that we're valued by others and ourselves, and we need to value ourselves. We hunger for laughter. We got to have some fun sometimes, right? Can't all be serious. There has to be some places where we can have fun and have laughter. But at the core, just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that sense of security. And I can honestly say to you that when I was a parent of Marion Collins, and I was in youth ministry, I had one sense of security about how things should be. But at the moment where Mary entered, she's my oldest, and when she entered youth ministry, my concept of parent youth ministry security changed. And some of the things that I thought were great and wonderful as a youth minister, before I had my own kids in there, I was like, good Lord, how did I get away with that, or why did I do that? You know? Because it changed when my child was actually in there, and I saw it through a different lens than when I saw it as a parent, as a non-parent. I don't know if that's happened for some of you or not. For honest, my wife came in earlier, delivered. She's a pediatrician. She used to get so frustrated when her patients would say, before we had children, well, you just don't, you'll understand when you're a parent. And she was like, well, I'm a pediatrician. I've been in med school, residency, and all this kind of stuff. But she'll tell you that it did change when she became a parent about her perspective as a pediatrician as well. And it does change. Because at the core of it, who we are is wrapped up in this identity of security and safety. And if you're shutting that off, then I don't want you in ministry. Okay? You need to check that. You need to figure out why that's not a value to you, because it is a value to the families that are in your ministry. Because I came up with this or heard this and sort of this idea here that about it's more than Safe Sanctuaries. What do you think this picture represents? The answer is not Charleston Hesper. So what do you think?
It's about what's in your heart.
All right. Your heart? And what is he holding up? The 10 Commandments. Okay? And so it's about this concept that you have both the law, but you also have the love. Right? You can't operate without one and the other. So, there's this love that's there about how you interact in relationship with people, but there's also the law. There's this list of sort of standards that have how you interact with people also. Okay? And it's a combination of the two. And so for me, I have to break them into systems, and that's how I've sort of classified Safe Sanctuaries and ethics and boundaries, is that Safe Sanctuaries is sort of listed as the law. These are the things that you have to do to people, background checks, these kind of things. But it can't be separate from the ethics and boundaries of how we live life and how we interact with people in relationships. Because we can have the best trained people, but if they don't know how to deal with people, and if they if we do detect that potentially they are a predator, but they're well trained in Safe Sanctuaries, we're not going to let them serve, hopefully, right? Because we detected something that's causing concern about it, or we're going to do a background check, or maybe we've done a background check and your check is clear, but there's just something that's not right. And so we're going to spend time with that person in another area of ministry before we let them engage in our most vulnerable areas of ministry. Okay? And so we are going to continue on. It's about what and it's about how, but it's not about that, it's about why you do it. And so this is what I want you to do. I want you to talk about real quick at your table Why do you think balancing the law, safe sanctuaries, and balancing love, healthy boundaries are equally important? Okay, so spend just a minute or so with your table. Give me some concepts that I haven't talked about yet, because I learn from you guys every time we do this. Okay, go ahead.
Part of it, Safe Sanctuaries, like especially with the healthy boundaries, it's easier if we're not training people in
Whatever it
about,
is,
you know, why
it's
you
just
do X, Y, and Z, then it's easier to break the law. You know, so I think that's part of it having it. But if it's just the law, it gets kind of boring. Okay, we got to do that. We got to do this. Two adults, two adults always in the car.
Just a few more seconds here. Everyone's
We're
shared.
going to have two adults in the car, not only to protect the youth, but also protect you. Because even the false accusation.
All right, let's refocus. Share, just take a few input from y'all. What was something that you shared with each other that you talked about? Jonathan, I heard you back there a little bit. Share a little bit about what you said.
I prefer not to. No. I was just saying it's important to have the balance and explain, even, within the law, explain the love of, we have these policies in place because even if it's just an accusation against you, we value you as a part of this church. We never want anything to come between your family, anything like that. So that's sort of the healthy boundaries of, let's say 2 adults per car with youth and things.
Yeah, so the law is there that if you're training it correctly, it's both preventative and protective. Preventative for things that might happen, but protective for those people that are in the ministry carrying it out, right? But you have those combination there. That's the law and the relationship, the law and the love are both balanced in that space. Because everyone is trained on the concepts of it and why it is necessary, so that it becomes protective for those people serving in the ministry as well. What else? Yes?
You're making an impact in the lives of youth, so the way that you're following, you yourself following the law and following the standards and procedures that are set, it sets an example for the youth of how they should be living their lives.
Right, it's an example set. We're modeling it, right? The challenge sometimes that I have with some places is they think that only the adults need to be trained in safe sanctuaries and healthy boundaries. We need to train everybody. Your children and youth in the ministries, your parents and volunteers and whoever, everyone in your entire church needs to be trained in the why of this process. Why do we have to have safe sanctuaries? Why do we have to check our children in? I just noticed the other day, I travel a lot on Sundays, so I'm not at Epworth a lot. But I don't have children in the children's nursery anymore. But I've noticed that they now have a computer check-in system over there, which is awesome. And why? Because for the longest time, Epworth has not been a church. For the longest time, they thought of themselves as this little country church out on the curve. And so we led that way. And we did some really non-healthy things leadership-wise. But we've not been a small country church on the corner for a long time. We worship 320, 325. But we've operated with some just one-person identities. And some of those folks have given up control now, and some of these folks that say, no, we've got to operate in a different way. And so they're checking kids in through a computer system and labels and things like that. We know how to get a hold of parents during worship. We're expecting parents to be trained and serve in the nursery. Whereas before, we used to think Grandma would just do it every Sunday, by herself often. Those are things that have to happen. And for your churches, no matter how big they are, how small they are, whatever label you want to put on yourselves, training everyone creates the opportunity for everyone to be fully engaged in ministry. Okay? Training everyone helps set up that everyone can be fully engaged in ministry. And the heart of the why is that, you've already said it, it's that the heart and souls of the people in the ministries we serve, but our hearts and souls are also important. Creating sacred space. That's what our most important thing in this process of creating disciples. We have to create spaces that are sacred where that can happen. And that would happen, doesn't have to happen just in a sanctuary. It can happen on a bus, in a car, at the camp. Don't think, I hate lock-ins, but it can happen at a lock-in. I really don't like lock-ins. But it can't be a sacred space if it's not a safe space. Okay? And then the reality is you are responsible. You are responsible. And I learned this back when I was a teacher and a coach. Back in my young days of coaching back in the 90s. I started coaching and teaching middle school and high school when I was in 1989 when I was 10. And I was the head wrestling coach right out of college. What?
When you were 10?
Oh, yeah. No, I was actually 22 or 23. And I was the head wrestling coach. And I had two assistants. This was like my third year. I had two assistant coaches that were just in their 20s themselves. And we had qualified to go to the semi-state in the wrestling tournament. That's the qualifying round right before state finals. And in Indiana, it's really tough to get anyone to semi-state beyond even, let alone state. But we had made it. We had 4 kids qualify for semi-state. So it was me and those 4 kids, a couple of guys who were serving as managers, and our assistant coaches. Well, these assistant coaches, one who had wrestled for me my first year there, but had graduated that year and gone off to college, also was the son of the school board president, so keep that in mind. He and his buddy went out after we got back from training that night before we started wrestling. They decided they needed to go out drinking after we all went to bed. Well, they came back at like 1 or 2 in the morning drunk. And they came in and got very loud with all of us. And they said, we're going back out. Who wants to go? And I was like, nobody's going, and you're not either. And they kept going on and on. Well, we took their keys. They got their keys back. So we took the distributor cap off their car so that wouldn't get them going. Well, they were, of course, very angry. But I was very angry because I was counting on them to help me coach and do what they were supposed to do. And so I made a decision at that point. I'm the responsible guy. They're going to make a decision on whether or not they're going to continue on by how they act in the next few hours. Well, they were just jerks the rest of the night about it the next morning. So I had to fire both of them right there. We were in Newcastle, which was about an hour and 20 minutes from where the school was that we were. So I told them both, I said, I'm going to give you your distributor cap back because I want you to drive back to Sheridan. You're not staying here to coach, and you're not coaching anymore. And so, again, one of them was the son of the school board president, who basically was my boss. And so I had to call him and say, look, I've just fired your son. So that means he's done now, and he won't be coaching middle school. Ultimately, his dad was mad that I had to do that, but he was also later on said, you made the right choice. I was responsible. Why? They weren't drunk when we got up the next morning, necessarily. They could have probably coached the tournament, but I had those 6 young men, high school students, who saw them and were seeing them as an example, and then seeing me as an example of how was I going to deal with that? And so I had to deal with it in that way, because I was responsible. And there's other stories along the way that you can think of. The reality is, if we're honest, and Stephanie talked about it a little bit, we can't do ministry alone. This was a survey that came out. And I did an adaptation to this survey for a training I did here at Epworth. But why are children's and youth ministries must be centralized? And we're going to talk about this again later. You'll see this slide in August when I talk about leadership. The census says that there's 73.4 million children and youth under the age of 18 years old in the United States right now. And if the census is right as well about those that are paid to do children's ministry and youth ministry, or children's ministry of some kind, whether it's clubs or volunteers or YMCA or whatever, there's about 108,000 paid folks. Well, if we're saying that they're the only ones that can be in ministry, work with them, then that means that 1 of those paid persons have to minister or reach 680 of those young people. It's not realistic. We're setting up unrealistic expectations. But yet we do that in the church. You know, we talked about it earlier. We hire someone or we appoint someone to be the lead volunteer or the paid youth worker or the paid children's minister or the volunteer children's or youth minister, and we say, they're yours. Figure out what to do with them. Okay? But you can't operate in ministry that way because you can't do it alone. You have to have teams of people around you. And so I need 3 volunteers real quick to come up here. Don't be scared, just come up.
All right. Kelly, one.
All right. I don't want to offend anyone, but I'm going to hand one of them the bag and ask them to blow it up. That doesn't mean that I think they're full of hot air.
I am.
But Kat's agreed to. So. All right, so here, Kat, you take this one.
Okay.
You're going to stand here, facing that direction.
Okay.
Deidre, you take that end and stand down there. Okay? Now move on down that way a little bit. Tighten your bag up. Kathy, you stand over here and hold that end. Okay? Go ahead and back up just a little bit, Deidre. Oh, we can't, yeah. All right. So here's the deal. Kat and I are going to race. She's already cheating. You're already cheating. You already hear you blowing into the bag. Kat and I are going to race to see who can blow up the bag the fastest. And then we'll talk about what happened. Okay? Does anyone know CPR?
Yes. Okay, good. If I pass out.
If either one of us pass out.
Oh, we know what we're going to That's me.
You pass out, Brad.
Yes.
Who's willing to put their lips on Brad?
Save his life. They don't teach that anymore.
Oh, thank goodness.
All right. Are you ready? You ready? All right. On 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
You're done.
Let's try it again. Maybe mine just already had some air in it.
Oh,
You can keep your air. Keep going.
All right.
Ready?
I can't blow air if you're making me laugh.
What?
I know.
All right. What's wrong with your bag? Does it have a hole in
I
it?
think so.
Nope. All right, let's watch what I did. Okay? I step back here.
Okay.
All right?
Fold it all the way out.
No, look, open it up. I'm not putting it up to my face. I don't know whose face has been on that, first of all. Ready? So then I just blow. Your face is still too close. Do you like to be right up in it all the time? Are you like a control freak? Are you micromanager?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Okay, put them back down. I hope that you don't have any germs. I'll watch it. So go ahead, Kathy. So here's the deal. Why did I show that? Because I like to make fun of Kat. So we can either try to blow the bag up by ourselves by putting it right up tight to our mouth, and that's how we often do ministry, right? We think, I've got to do this. If nobody else does this Sunday school class, the kids are going to hell. And so it's all on me. It's me or Satan, me or Satan. And so we put our face right up in there and blow it, and we try to micromanage it and try to fill the bag, but we wear ourselves out. Okay? But we can't do ministry that way because there's a lot of other energy in the room if we just step back. Okay? And what happens with this is I can focus my energy in a direction and at the same time invite everyone else's air into the bag. Okay? And so I just blow at a steady pace and I keep my face back away from it. So I'm not trying to maximize all the space and I just blow. And the bag fills up. Because while I'm blowing that that steady stream of air. I'm just being consistent. You can let go. I'm just being consistently blowing my part and doing my job. The movement of my air into this bag is pulling the rest of the air in the room into this bag so I can fill it up together. We have to decentralize because we can't think we have to do ministry by ourselves. Because when we start to think that we're the only ones who can do ministry, that's when we start to be set up for boundary violations. That's when we start to cut corners on Safe Sanctuaries and other things. And I just threw that on the floor, so hopefully you won't be freaked out by that. So we have to decentralize. That was if I'd have seen this factor years ago when we were doing Youth Ministry Institute, this factor alone right here would have caused me to stop doing Youth Ministry Institute by itself. It's not that we don't want very strongly trained people. We want that. But if we don't train people to work in teams in ministry, we're never going to get teams in ministry. If we don't ever invite them into serving together, then we're always going to be trying to play catch up here. Okay? So let's dive into what we're going to talk about next. Because these kids that we have in our ministry, these families that we have in our ministry are precious, right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out something that you have on you right now or with you that you would think is valuable. Pull something out. What would you have that's highly valuable to you? Okay? And after you pull it out, I want you to turn to somebody near you, maybe somebody you haven't talked to yet, and I want you to talk about why it would be difficult for you or why this is of value to you, and if something happened to it, how would you feel? All right? So take about 90 seconds to do that. Go.
Feel the same way about it that I do.
All right, you got about 10 seconds. So let's regroup and let's have somebody share. You're just going to hold up what it is that you said would be valuable and difficult if you lost it, and then tell us why. Okay? Who else? Because Kathy's talked. Who else? Hashtag Jesus back there. You held something up, didn't you? Yeah. Tell me your first name.
Penny, yes.
Penny? Yeah. Tell me about your phone. Why is that? Tell us why your phone would be difficult if you lost it.
It has my numbers to reach all my family, my friends, my church people, work. It helps me with doing my work that I don't really do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can text, I can call. It's a really good communication form.
So
I would be crazy.
Right. It keeps you connected to other people, communicating. In an emergency, you would be able to reach out to anyone that's on your phone, right? Okay? What else? Somebody else told something else different. Yes, tell me your name. Sheila. What about your glasses?
I couldn't see anything if I didn't have my glasses.
Right, she wouldn't be able to see anything. I'm the same way. I have no idea where Sheila is now. She's somewhere over there. It's a mixture of Gary and Sheila. So, yeah. And so these glasses are important to Sheila and I, and anyone else maybe that wear glasses. Some of you might wear them because they look cool. And my parents said, girls dig guys that wear glasses, and so that's part of the reason why I decided to wear them. Now I can't see without them. Yes. What did you hold up? Your knife?
This is my daddy's knife. He's passed away. Wednesday, $1 million. I carry everything everywhere I go.
All right, so she has this pocket knife that was her dad's that has this sentimental connection value to her that she wouldn't, for $1 million, buy. Maybe $2 million if you got it, but not $1 million. But we have these things, right, that we hold that are valuable for the sentimental things that they mean to us and so on. And so we have all these things, phones, glasses, keys, but how about how do losing something valuable compared to the risk that we might face in ministry? Think about that 3-year-old little boy or that 17-year-old youth in that youth ministry. Think about deciding not to wear seatbelts on a bus, on a van trip on the way back from Georgia, like one youth ministry did, and the driver fell asleep on 65. Okay, happened about 4 or 5 years ago.
You know, or even just one unhappy teenager who then you think you don't need to have another adult. That unhappy teenager says something that that isn't true. I've seen it ruin a career.
Yep.
And when it ruined a career, it also ruined the family.
Yep.
And even when the teenager said, yeah, it didn't really happen,
Right.
it didn't matter.
The damage had been done. The accusations were already there, and the uncertainty was already brought up. The concern was already expressed. And so, while things like phones and glasses and maybe a pocket knife might be hard for us to lose, they're all replaceable. They're all replaceable. Gary?
Like a family who escapes a fire and the house burns to the ground, and they all say, we can replace all that.
Exactly.
We're all alive.
Right?
That's the
Yeah.
only thing that matters.
That's the things that matter. It's like these people, how do we protect the ones that God's blessed us with and the ones that God will bless us with in the future, because our ministry is affected by the things that happen in the present and in the past. Our future ministry is affected by that. It's not just who we are in the moment. So here's what I'm going to do. On your handout, you've got a series of 6 squares. I've got 6 slides that I'm going to put up on the screen. They're going to be on the screen for about 7 to 10 seconds. You're going to watch them. They'll rotate through twice. And while you're watching them, if you'll want to watch them through the first time possibly. Second time through, see if you can think why I would put them in this series of slides. And then we're going to talk about each one of them separately together. Okay, are you ready? Go. So they're going to rotate on their own.
That's how I play.
And you're going to rotate back through one more time. So what risky situations did you identify and what made them risky? So just again, take a few minutes, I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to just sort of talk with the person next to you, to sort of think about each one of those 6 slides. So you've got about 10 seconds a slide to organize your thoughts. Go ahead, and then we'll share with each other. You got about 15 seconds.
They have more access to distractions, to danger.
3, 2, 1. All right, so let's talk about what made these situations risky. As much as we've had difficulties with internet today, anyway, what about this slide? Anybody? She saw something, right? Okay. Saw something inappropriate.
Said something.
She's getting ready to send something inappropriate. I told Stephanie earlier, I'm not sure she said it, she may have said it while I was out trying to fix the internet, but I said to her, please give a disclaimer for them not to search Big Butt Video on Google.
I didn't.
No, you didn't. We put the link to the video in the Dropbox. Don't search for that. Not that I have. I can just imagine what could come up. All right. All right. What about this one? Be careful with competition, anger management, safety in sports. So it's like there was a movie that Billy Bob Thornton was in. He was a gym teacher, and I don't remember. It was so good at illustrating games that you shouldn't play. Like he played dodgeball with basketballs, or medicine balls, I think it was. What? Mr. Huh? They were really heavy balls, and so when they got hit, it's like, man, it's like they knocked them out, you know. We tend to think that playing sports and competitive games in youth ministry is okay. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You've got to really judge your youth group and your kids. If you've got hyper-competitive kids like my son or our former pastor's son in the youth ministry, you need to have them being managers of the game, not participants in the game. Because they'll get so into the game that if they don't win, they're going to be very angry with everyone else and rude to everyone else. Deidre, were you going to say something about that?
We recently had a biblical member from Second King come to our church, and their lead singer spoke to our youth group because we've had a lot of problems with rough housing.
Yeah.
And she actually sustained a traumatic brain injury playing Red Rover at youth group.
Wow.
And just, it
Right.
literally changed her life.
Yeah. They're playing just the games that we play, we got to be safe. And the things that we do sometimes on trips, it's like, listen, if you don't know how to rock climb, don't take your group to Beersheba and climb the gorge. All right, make sure that you have somebody that if that's what you want to do, then have somebody do that. Why do I say that? Because there was a woman in our Youth Ministry Institute class back years ago. She bragged about how she took her kids rock climbing and she'd never done it before, and nobody on her team had, but yet they did it. We were all like, "You're lucky, nobody died," because you can die rock climbing. Okay? So be careful what you're doing. It's fine to take risks and giving them opportunities to play games, but know what the risks are and know how to be prepared. Okay? All right, this situation. Surface, one adult is only one adult in the room, right?
I couldn't tell. The one in the red could be possibly
Maybe adult, maybe an adult. My problem with this situation is I'm hoping this is not a Sunday school classroom. Maybe it's a school classroom. I don't ever want to come into one of your Sunday school classrooms and see a teacher sitting back away from the rest of the students. And they're sitting away, and the activity of the training is happening up here, and they're sitting back behind their desks like they're governing over the space. It's got to be a cooperative space of learning together. And so, yes, 2 adults need to be in the room. Maybe they're all reading or whatever. Some folks have always said, well, it doesn't look like they're very engaged in what's going on, or they're not paying attention. But how do you know what they're paying attention to? Okay? All right? What about this one? Yeah, bullying, app-based picture sending apps, things like that. We're going to talk about that later. Some things like Snapchat is the evil of Snapchat. I'm not one of those guys that says that all apps are evil. I think that if we don't let our kids understand the potential problems with the way that they can engage with it, then it can become a problem. So we have to be open and honest about training kids to how to use their phones. We had a counselor come to Epworth here to do some training on from the Hope Center, and he was talking about. I think they were talking about sex was the training they were going to talk about let's talk about sex. I think was the thing of it. But he had a parents thing, and he talked about how parents don't realize when they give them these phones that they're giving them access to anything in the world. And oftentimes we give these phones to our children, and we don't ever think about training them on what's appropriate, or we don't set up safeguards that are for what's appropriate, and so on. So anything can be used for harm. You know, and once it's out on the internet, like once you take a picture and you send it, even if it's an app that claims that it's going to go away, it's not away. It's in some database somewhere on the web, in the cloud, waiting to be accessed by somebody. Okay? We had a new high school open up here a few years ago, and the freshman football team, pretty much, not all of them, but a good portion of them, decided it would be cool to collect photos of their girls up there at the school, except they blackmailed them and told them, I don't know what the whole story was, but they had some pictures of them that were nude from the waist up, and they asked them to Snapchat them to them, and they said, we just want them, we're gonna get rid of them, and so on. Well, they were Snapchatting them to them, and they were screenshotting them, and then they built a website, and they were selling access to the other kids in the school, and they basically had this porn site of girls in their high school. This brand new high school just been built. They're dealing with it right away, right there, right? Those kids were all arrested, charged. They're all in the sex registry. Okay. Sexting. If they're caught, they become sex registry offenders because they're sending pornographic material over the airwave. Okay. Kids need to understand that. Adults need to understand that. Teachers need to understand that. There was just a teacher out in South Carolina that I saw. She left her phone unattended in her classroom. One of her students picked it up, found a nude picture of her that she said she'd just taken to send to her husband on Valentine's Day. He decided, let's share this across the internet, and so he shared it out. She was fired. He hasn't been charged yet, but there are charges pending. So nobody needs to see a naked picture of me. So I don't think. All right. What about this one? Inappropriate boundaries, right? Maybe this is the girl's dad. We don't know. Just on this picture, inappropriate contact. We as adults can control contact. And I had a lady one time, well, you don't understand babies. I said, yes, I do. I was a stay-at-home dad for 3 years. I know whether I can control whether or not I'm going to give a hug or not give a hug. All right? There are other ways to provide the same contact without that hugging. We often tend to be first huggers and then other forms of contact. But the reality is, in some settings, you may have kids in your ministry who you go to hug, and that's not the kind of contact they want at all, and that's going to cause harm to them, or they're going to bring up harm. I know Deidre helps with a church who has different backgrounds around that, right? I mean, abusive backgrounds. And so we have to a hug might be appropriate, and sometimes it's not the first choice. Okay? You want to say anything else about that? You guys have had some training in that.
Yeah.
So,
you don't know what that kid has been through, and especially another big thing is not just abused children, but autistic children.
Yep.
They do not like any kind of sensory things, and we don't always get that information firsthand.
Right.
So just I have several that we bump knuckles.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they like, and that's how they greet me. Mm-hmm. And just realizing that not everybody has been through maybe what we've been through, or their lives are like what we would like to think about.
Right. Okay? So control contact situations. And then, of course, this one. Allergies, all kinds of allergies. The weirdest response that I got from a training the other day, there's a young, like an 18-year-old that's running for president, and somebody said, well, I thought you were talking about something sexually inappropriate. I was like, no, it's allergies, dude. Just don't let your brain go there. Yes, they're peanuts. That's not what I'm talking about. You need to have some counseling. Let's wait until after the meeting's over. Julie, can you give a piece of paper to like every 3 or 4 people? Probably 4 or 5 people. There's one of those blank pieces of paper. It was in one of those boxes. So Julie's going to give actually just probably good enough. That'd be good. But I want you in groups of 4 to 5. So like Nick, you guys might turn around and just go with Derek and Sheila and this young man here, and then we'll go with. So you have groups of 5. You guys are all together. Sheila, add Nick and them in, and then that table is all one group too. Okay. So All right? So you have to think about allergies. Like today, for Jody, and Jody, I don't mean to call you out, but we made a mistake on lunch. You know, we knew that there was a gluten allergy, and we thought that Jason's Deli understood what we wanted, but they didn't. So we had to make that adjustment for her. Know what allergies are in the room. Ask parents to disclose that. Ask kids to disclose that. My wife, for example, is allergic to shellfish, and she had a meeting the other day at Second Harvest Food Bank with some folks, and they finished their meeting, and they decided to have lunch with what they're serving that day. Everybody thought it was vegetable soup, but it was actually Manhattan clam chowder. And so Shelly took a bite of it, and immediately her tongue started getting the sensation, swelled up, started to have reaction. She was in a meeting full of doctors, and one of her friends that was a former resident with her had an EpiPen, and so he helped her, and so on. But you know, she went to present to Blue Cross Blue Shield about something and ended up having an allergic reaction to clam chowder. So you got to know what's going on and what you're serving. You got to let parents know if they're bringing snacks, or whoever's bringing your snacks for Sunday night or Wednesday night or whatever. Say, hey, we've got this many kids that have, or we've got this many allergies in the room. Don't bring peanuts. Have peanut-free zone, you know. Whatever other gluten-free options. There's a myriad of allergies out there that we need to be aware of. All right, so Julie has given you a blank sheet of paper. I need one of you to be the artist, and I need the rest of you to cheer that artist on. Okay? You are going to draw your interpretation of a church building or a church. Okay? And I don't want you to spend a lot of time on it, so you have 65 seconds to draw it. But you have to use the entire page. Okay? Take up the entire page with this drawing of your church. And then we're going to move forward. Are you ready? So go. 65 seconds. All right, we're almost done. We're going to celebrate our artists here as we finish. Hold it up for everybody to see. Wow, that's great. That's really good. You got an A in art. That's really good. Come on, put your pencils down. We're good. We're not going to sell it. Oh, that one looks like it might get wet and rain because it's missing. Good. All right. So here's what we're going to do. With any good art, it's not valuable until it's got some damage to it. So it's going to really look damaged in a minute. Here's what I want you to do. In your group, you're going to take your piece of art, and as you share it, you're going to say something that you've seen or that you're concerned about that could be a risk in your ministry. And as you name it, you're going to tear off a piece of that art. Okay? And you're just going to pass it around until I tell you to stop or until you have nothing else to tear up. You're going to keep those pieces. Each person will keep their own piece as they tear it. All right? Go. So name something, tear it. Name something, tear it. Pass it around to the next person.
Also, some of our,
maybe it's something like you don't have windows in classroom doors, or maybe you don't have enough adult volunteers in the Sunday school classrooms, or maybe you got that one guy that goes around and hugs everyone, chases them in the hallway to give them a hug. Maybe that's something that happens. I don't know. Yeah, or they say, I'll give you a piece of candy if you give me a hug. All right, we're almost done. You have one more risk to name, and then we're going to go on. All right, let's stop. So, let me see your where's your drawing now? Hold up your art. Y'all tore it up. So what did these risks do to your church? It just tore it apart, right? What do you think the story that I shared earlier about Fellowship Bible might be doing to that church? Tearing it up. About the youth minister's wife at the other church, tearing it up. Okay? And so, yes?
I've served 2 churches that had a sexual misconduct problem, and it's taken them 20 years to get over it.
Yeah. 20 years. We're still having people asking whether or not we think Cedar Crest is safe. And Cedar Crest leadership and Cedar Crest structure has changed multiple times during that time frame. And and those things were changed immediately, but that culture was still there, that happened there, right? Christine served there, and she faced those questions all the time. Russell today still is facing those questions from what happened there back in the 90s. And so, if I were to ask you to put this back together, would you be able to do it? Eventually, right? But it probably wouldn't look the same. Those scars would definitely be there. There might be some missing pieces too. But the reality is, just as Tom said, he served in a couple different places where there have been situations that have happened. They're still dealing with it. They are dealing with it. They're trying to work through it. And I said earlier that, and I'm not bashing Fellowship Bible Church, but what they did, they tried to hide it. They thought hiding it was their answer, as opposed to addressing it. Them hiding it has done more harm than them bringing it to light and addressing it. Because those scars that are there are scars that we can learn from. It's not scars that we ever wanted to happen, but there are things that we can learn from. And so I'm telling you, as you are people in leadership, if you see things that you're concerned about with the physical building that you're utilizing, like I said, maybe you do have classrooms that don't have windows in them. Okay? Address that with your church. If they won't listen to you, have me come out and I'll address that with your church. Maybe you've got a children's Sunday school classroom or a nursery that's set up that's got. They really thought it'd be great to create these areas for kids to play in that would be sort of isolated. So they put bookshelves or things set up that block off spaces. Not a good idea. Okay, I had to explain to a nursery worker why we didn't want to have like a deadbolt type lock on the inside of the bathroom in our nursery bathroom at one of the churches. She was like, well, what happens if we have a shooter come in? We want to be able to lock everyone in that room, but we don't have any way to lock it. And I was like, well, the problem with putting a lock on there in that way is that any child could lock themselves in that space and we wouldn't be able to get in there to get them out if you did something like that. So we have to think of other options for those situations. Okay? And so, yes, we can put it back together, and there might be scars, but we have to be willing to address the scars. That's the reason why we ask you to bring those things up. And so, I did this with a church one time years ago, and the guy that met me at the door, he was the head of the trustees, and he said, just want you to know I'm not buying what you're selling tonight. And I was like, that's good. I'm not planning on selling you anything. I'm going to help you discover why it is that you need to implement what I'm talking about. And by the end of the night, he was ready to put in windows in every classroom door that was around the fellowship hall where we were meeting that they were using for classrooms. Because he realized that on Sunday those doors are closed and children are inside those rooms, or youth are inside those rooms, or even adults, I mean, adults are vulnerable too if there's a predator in the space. Okay? It's about keeping everybody safe. And so we're going to move fast through this section. We often talk about with Safe Sanctuaries and Healthy Boundaries that we have a policy. And policy and procedures are great. A policy is not the same thing as a procedure. A policy is often, we confuse the two. The policy component of this document would be the reasons why we hold this important. That we believe in the sanctity of all people and that they're all created by God and we want them to be safe and create sacred spaces and so on. That's a policy. And we write it down. Procedures are how we're going to live that out. How are we going to actually do the things that we're going to do? And so here's what I want you to do. I want this table to stand up and form a circle. This table, you guys come form a circle like right over there real tight. You guys form a circle over there. You guys form a circle right here. You guys form a circle back there by Stephanie. Okay, form that circle and then send one person up to me. Well, yeah, you want to be in a circle shoulder to shoulder. Okay? And then send one person up to me. Kat, you've already volunteered. Let Nick do it. Gosh. Send one person up to me after you get done. All right. Y'all can go back to your tables too. You guys can sit back down. Once your representative is up here, you can sit back down. Christine, come on up. You can't keep retelling it. Have you got it yet, Kat? Has Tom told you?
Don't rush me, Brian. I'm sorry.
All right, you guys can sit down. Kat, come on up here. Now, John is going to share what he heard from the wise folks at Woodbury and Westmoreland. I think that's who's in that group.
Roger said Rover.
Nice. Christine?
Risk management rewards righteousness.
Wow, that's not bad.
Take care of your own responsibilities.
He's making stuff up.
Come on, Kat. The rich and the rich management.
The rich and the rich management. My goodness. Now,
We got it.
you think, let's see who has it correct. Let's go to the slide that actually has the words on it. I don't understand why you guys had so much problem. This is what it was supposed to say. Risky risk management responsibilities, riches, rights, riches, and righteousness and rewards. Did you say all that, Eve? Did you share that? Tell me, what's your name, sir? Sam. Did he tell you that, Sam? She did pretty good. Now, did you share it to the next person? Somewhere Rover got thrown in there. So what do you think? So what happened to the message? It got scrambled. Started out as a mess, right? Take care of something. Take care of your responsibilities. Yeah, they just reworded it. So how is this like or unlike when we have these? We don't have clear policies and procedures in our ministries. So what happens to the procedures and policies at our church whenever they're not clear, or we're not actually training people? We're just saying, hey Gary, I think this is what you're supposed to do here in this situation, right? And then And then Gary's decided that I'm passing my information on to Gary, and Gary's going to do his time in ministry for a little while, and he's going to say, well, hey, Christine, come on in. You're going to take my place now. So Gary tells Christine how it is, right? Go ahead, Gary.
We had just done our Safe Sanctuary policy, and a short time after, a man entered our church on a Sunday morning, started going into Sunday school classes, singing songs to that, and behaving erratically. One Sunday he came in, put a robe on, and joined the choir.
Wow.
And I understand during the whole sermon he tried to get up and make comments and preach, and they set him back down.
Wow.
But here's the scary thing. 6 months, a year later, he was arrested for a murder.
Oh my God.
The man was mentally ill. He had actually murdered somebody.
Wow.
But we reacted. I thought we reacted very well. Immediately people went. We kind of eased him out of the situation.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think in those situations, you got to know how to respond appropriately. You know, I think if they could have responded inappropriately by being very physical and confrontational with him, but by directing him out of that space, providing him, it sounds like he had multiple opportunities to figure out whether this was where he was going to fit in, and then you realized he needed some help. Okay? The only thing that we can control is our response to how we deal with things, right? And I think that we have to be prepared for all situations, but we have to train those key people who are going to be those responders in those situations to make sure they know how to appropriately respond. And you have to have policies and procedures that are written down that you can train others on, and that they know where it is. And they don't have to be this full, blown-out book of policy. It can be these sort of 10 factors for safety that you need to remind people of. The full policy is there to refer to in the overall training, but maybe there's 5 or 10 key points that they need to know every time they come in. So we worked with Grace United Methodist Church, and they were concerned about when the way that they were set up. They were concerned that parents would let children leave the sanctuary, and then the children would they'd find them down in the children's wing and other places in the building and so on. And so they were trying to figure out, what do. They don't want them to feel like they're closed off and not be able to use the space. But you don't need children unattended wandering through your building either during worship. And so they decided that once Sunday school was over, they would have the children's minister and one other person walk through the children's wing and make sure that it was empty, and close every door, lock every door behind them so that they could shut that space down, and make sure that it was shut off, so that whenever everyone went into worship, there wasn't any need for anyone to be back down in that children's area. Okay? So that was just a simple thing that they did to make sure that they could close that space down. All right? They also, and we are not successful with it at our church. I get frustrated on a Sunday. I'll see parents just let their 4 and 5-year-olds just walk out of worship and go to the bathroom. There's got to be parents taking care of their kids. You just can't let them just walk out of worship, because, like at our church, and I've said this to them, we have this very attractive playground that they can see when they walk out of the sanctuary to go out into the narthex to go to the bathroom. And if my kids, we didn't have that playground when they were little, but I can guarantee you, them combined with our pastor's kids, they would have bolted to that playground every time. Okay? That's just how, Collins and Trent and Miranda and Mary were. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be together and have fun. But Mary and Miranda would ask to go to the bathroom. We had to supervise them, because if not, 30 minutes later they still wouldn't be back, because they're in there doing their hair or having a water fight or whatever. World Communion Sunday one time, the lady that organized communion thought it would be good to let Collins and Trent, who were about 5 or 6 at the time, have a loaf of leftover bread. Well, Chip and I were in a meeting. Shelley and Debbie were having praise team practice. We thought they were all supposed to be together with a high school and a college student that were there sort of supervising kids that were in the praise team. Collins and Trent took the loaf of bread, went into the choir room, found a fan, turned the fan on, and decided it would be cool to see what happens when you put bread through the back of a fan.
What does happen?
It snows. All over the black chairs in the choir room. which were pretty new at that time. The choir director was not happy. So you have to have these things in place to know where people are, how you're going to manage it. You have to have these policies written down. And so we talk about it, breaking it down into 3 ways: people, programs, and premises. People, programs, and premises. So who are the people that are going to be involved in the ministry, whether they're serving in the ministry or being served by the ministry? Okay? Who are the people? And those people that are serving in the ministry, that you screen every employee and volunteer. You have them write a written application. Have them complete a national background check. And we've had some trouble trying to figure out what we were going to do with background checks or recommend to you all from a conference level. And Patty has been able to we found a good source. Because the challenge that we had, especially here in Tennessee, is that counties don't talk to other counties in Tennessee. They're not sharing data from one county to another. And some background check companies require you to pay for every county that you want to have checked. Okay? So say you lived in Davidson County, or this person lived in Davidson County, and then they moved to Murray County, and you wanted to do a background check on them. Well, unless you said, I need to check them in Davidson County and check them in Murray County, you're not going to get that information on them. Okay? So, and I didn't bring that information. Did we finalize that, Julie? That background check information? I think they're going to post it on the conference website. But this new system, there's different levels of background checking that you can do. It's still cloud-based. You'll pay the person. It's about $25. That's the challenge to get the background check that you need. It's a little more expensive. But you want to do a national background check. And there'll be information on tnumc.org for you to be able to do that. We won't run those for you. You'll run them yourself, and it's all through the internet.
What section on the website will that be posted?
We are in the process of building a new website. So on the current website, I don't have the answer to that, other than it might be on the left margin in the... there might be a link there if it's up. She just finalized that and shared it with us at our staff meeting this last week. So, and then when you get the background check, you need to decide who is it on the church staff or the church leadership that's going to receive the report of the background check. Some churches say that's the pastor. Other churches say that's the SBR chair. Some places maybe there's an administrative assistant or the chair of education. You need to decide who that person is and how that's going to be handled. With it being paperless now, if a person has a background check done and when the report comes back, it'll either come back as saying there are no flags or no concerns, or it'll come back with saying, well, we have one concern, and you can open it up and click on what the concern is and see what it is. That might be something, if you did a national driver's check, it might say that they had a speeding ticket here, or it could be that they had a drug charge somewhere, and so on. But you're going to actually look at those red flags and decide whether or not, what do we need to do to resolve this situation. Okay? And you're going to interview everyone, meaning that you're going to spend some time and just make sure that you're asking them, well, we want you to serve here, but we want to make sure it's where you feel most comfortable. So spend some time making sure that they're in the right place. Okay? You don't want Mrs. Cranky Pants, leading children's ministry if she hates kids. But we often do that. We're just like, oh, I'm going to volunteer. Let's put Miss Cranky Pants over in the children's ministry. And you got kids crying and not wanting to go to Sunday school or children's church or whatever it is anymore because she's in there screaming and yelling at them. Okay? And then follow the 6-month rule. The 6-month rule is different in different places, but the basis of it is that that you want anyone that is just brand new, like they've come in and they've never served before, pair them up with somebody else for at least 6 months, so that they're first of all that people are getting to know them, they're getting acclimated, they're understanding what the church is about and who they are there and so on. But also, it's not just dropping them into the fire pit by themselves. But they're actually serving along somebody else. You want to background check them and so on, and you want them to be trained and all that kind of stuff. But even just having a background check and training doesn't mean that they should be left to roam freely. Okay? Make sure that they're partnered up with someone. Yes.
How does that work with parents who are not active in church but want to be a part of, like, Wednesday night worship, those kind of things? How does, I mean, you've got the 6-month rule, they really haven't met that, but you can't exclude parents, right?
Yeah, but you can. They don't necessarily need to be in leadership. I mean, they can be there and be present and be in the space, but you're not going to ask them to go lead a small group by themselves.
And that would be something that we could have written up in our policy.
Yes, yeah.
We're getting that. People are saying,
Yeah.
no, they have to background check.
And here's the deal. Everybody's going to tell you that they've been background checked. And here's the challenge that I want you to think about, trying to set your standard to, because we started to think that it was okay, and then we realized, you know what, we need to have that background checks ourselves. I'm serve on the board of directors for Project Transformation Tennessee, and we've had a couple of situations in this last year where the persons volunteering in the ministry both said that they had the partner church that they were volunteering with both said those folks had had background checks. Well, after a situation came up in both of their personal lives, after investigation, well, the reality was they hadn't been background checked. Or the partner church didn't actually see the background check, or, and so on. So for PT, what we're saying now is, if you're a partner church, you need to have seen, and you're bringing these groups of volunteers, we expect that you will have a copy or have seen a copy of their background check. You can't just say, you got a partner that's a person that's volunteering and they had a background check through the school system. You have to actually, the person who's signing off on there, we're telling them, we want you to actually see that background check so that you can verify that there weren't any red flags and that they actually had it and that it's current. Because it's really easy for somebody to say they've had a background check, but it's been 5 years ago or 6 years ago. We recommend them every 3 years, okay, in the Tennessee Conference. So like for me, it's probably time for me to have another background check, so I'll need to do that with this new system. And so, like, if parents want to volunteer, that's great. They should have a background check that the church has access to.
Even if they're just coming in, like, at the last minute, that was
Yeah.
my question.
If they're coming, here's what you can set up. You can set up different levels of volunteer. You can have like a tier system, and we talked about that too. Like, it depends on how you number it. Say tier 1 is your most vetted people. All right, so you have tier 1 volunteers. Tier 1 volunteers are going to be able to lead a small group and with someone that's not a tier 1. You might have somebody that's just a one-off volunteer. They're just coming in to bring in snacks that night, but they're not hanging out. If they're not going to spend any time there interacting with kids and so on, you're not going to ask them to be background checked. Okay? But if you're asking them to come and go on a mission trip with you somewhere, or on Warmth and Winter, or Summer Sizzler, or a lock-in, or whatever else, you definitely want to have a background check. Okay? And if they're going to volunteer regularly in Sunday school or on Wednesday night or Sunday afternoon, whatever your youth group time is, have them be a background check. And I'm saying to churches now, as they prepare their budgets, that they need to think about putting some money aside for the purposes of background checking. It may not be that they cover the entire amount of a background check, but they maybe cover 50% or something. But they're allocating some money in the budget for background check purposes. I know at Project Transformation, we're talking about how do we do that in our budget, making sure that we have money set aside for background checking. Okay? Yes, Tom?
The biggest problem I've had with background checks has been military with top security clearance. And they just don't want you.
Well, what I'm asking for them, what I'm saying to them is the same thing. We don't need a government level check on you, but we need a background check on you. So if we can't have access to that background check, then we want to run our own background check through Ashland City United Methodist Church. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So that you have it on file, that you have a record on file that they had the background check. Okay. We have, all of you probably have teachers that are in your churches that might serve in some way or another. And they have background checks through their school systems. You need to have one of their, I'm recommending best practices, you have your own background check for them in your file. Okay? That's best practice. Does that mean it always happens? Maybe not. Programs, you have to think about the things that are happening. And so the adult to youth ratio, we recommend 1 to 8, which means 2 to 16. In her numbers, you said 1 volunteer per 5, right? And that's, so 1 per 5, 2 per 10. Okay? For mission trips, it's a little bit less than that. And this is often set by mission companies, but 1 to 4, 2 to 8. I know when we served at Mountaintop, we had 2 adults and usually 8 students to create our YRG group, our youth renewal group, a serving group there at Mountaintop. The 2 adult rule and the 5-year older rule, 2 adults, always have 2 adults in the space. And like we're talking about these tier volunteers level. Maybe it's difficult for you to have 2 highest trained, vetted people there. But at least have a tier 1 person with somebody that has a background check and maybe hasn't received the training yet, but they're working towards getting the training. Okay? So pair them that way. 5-year older rule. We want to make sure that if you're serving, that those that are serving in those leadership, supervisory roles, that they're at least 5 years older than the people that they're leading in terms of students leading other students. You know, it's challenging sometimes when you have, you might be in a college town where kids go off, are in your youth group and they graduate and they go off to college and they feel called to ministry and they want to serve in ministry. And so they come back and they say, well, let's serve in youth ministry. I recommend that they have them serve in children's ministry, have them serve in adult ministry, give them other experiences in other places first, so that they have some separation from the youth group that they just were a youth in before they come back and become a youth group volunteer. Okay? And it's challenging because we want to nurture their call to ministry, but we want to make sure that we're not setting them up for difficulty in terms of those students that are in the ministry that they just came out of are not understanding, hey, this person's in a different role now. You know, I can't treat them like I did in youth group now. So that you move them over to children's ministry or adult ministry somewhere else. Health and medical release forms. Not an option. Get one on every person. Okay? Have that information on every person that's in your ministry, both adults and youth. Don't ever be out on the road somewhere where you don't have access to that information and something happens and you can't either one, get the medical care they need, which you will, but you won't be able to get the access to that, or whether you won't be able to contact a parent, a spouse, and so on. Be prepared for that. That's why we ask for it, because we want to make sure that we have that information. It's not that we're trying to have this big database. It's a lot of work for us to manage all those papers that we collect in. But it's important that we have that information in case something were to happen.
We were told that they need to be notarized once a year. Is there any purpose in that?
No. I mean, that's another best practice. Who's my lawyer in the room? Is there a lawyer here? Does it have to be? They used to say it did, and then now they don't. I mean, it's like, I don't think it's, I think that's some mission camps, some youth camps, sometimes will require it to be notarized. I don't think it carries any weight to have it notarized. So yes, Julie.
I never got mine notarized except when I was on a mission trip. If I was taking my kids out of the state of Tennessee, you call whatever location you're going to, and you call that hospital and say, if I bring a kid to you, do I have to have it notarized? And every mission trip I've gone on, before I leave, I've had to have them notarized. Just the kids that are going on the trip, because the hospitals outside of Tennessee will want it notarized.
Yeah.
That'll get you in, and I've had to take kids to the hospital, and it gets you in quick and gets them taken to medical care.
But even on that, a yearly one doesn't matter, right? It has to be notarized specifically for that trip, correct?
Yeah,
Well,
you just want your yearly medical record
Yeah.
anyway. You get that updated every year.
Yeah.
As things change, and
Right.
so whenever I have a parent meeting once a month or once a year, parents always, they didn't leave that meeting without me having a medical record on their kids.
Right.
And then before mission trip, I would have a meeting and we would have someone come in and sit down and notarize all of them.
Okay, so then premises,
and wait, one more little detail.
detail.
And so what you may be thinking, oh geez, I don't know anybody that's got their notary. Work backwards from that. I have actually specifically recruited one or two adults to get their notary just so we had it.
Right.
And boom, it was done.
Who's there?
Yeah, most churches will have somebody in there in the church that'll have someone that can notarize for you.
That leads to my
And
next
if
question.
you don't, then like she said.
There's somebody in your town, post office,
Yeah.
bank.
But what you want is somebody that'll come on site
Yeah,
for
right.
you.
Right.
But if I have my own, as the youth leader, can I out, okay.
If you're a notary, yeah, no. All right, let's talk about premises real quick. Hold activities in highly visible locations, okay? Again, we talked about that a little bit about space and so on, meaning that you don't need to have activities that are down, hidden in the corner in the basement. Right? That's where we like to put youth groups, but it's not necessarily the best place. Especially if you don't have enough volunteers and you still want to do the program, you need to move it up into the sanctuary where the choir is. And when they ask you why, we say, we need somebody to volunteer. So then we'll go down to the basement. So who will volunteer? Nobody. Well, we won't have youth anymore. So there you go. All right. Leave doors open. Okay. That's always the thing too. Then they're so darn loud. Close the door. Well, give us some windows. Give us some space that we can be in, where and so on. You don't need to close doors. Then lock unused areas. Lock those doors. There's no reason to keep them unlocked. Okay? And then establish an action plan. And this is the one thing that I think churches do not really do. I've not seen them in churches. When I go in, I see them in every hotel that I stay in. Even the Thrifty Inn across the way from my office that has a shooter on constantly. I bet they have action plan on the inside of their door about how to get out in case of a shooting. Because I saw people running when I saw that shooter that one day. There was a shooter at my office.
Where is your office and you work at what?
We're in the mission field. So what to do in terms of an action plan. So where do you go? Like, what's your rallying point if there's a fire? Where are you going to tell people to exit the building and meet together and so on, so somebody can take account of who everybody is? Where are you going to go if you're in the building and there's an inclement weather situation, a tornado? All right, what's that plan look like? And then what's going to happen if there is an intruder?
Yeah.
An active shooter. The Department of Homeland Security has a new training video that's out about what to do. Remember the stop, drop, and roll for fire?
Yeah.
It's based on 3 words like that, and I truly meant to remember what those words were, and I don't remember what they were now. I watched the video and so on. But your local police officers, force, especially the state police, I believe they're able to come out and do a training for you. About that. I know Franklin First, when they moved into their new building, they partnered with the Franklin Police Department and they came out and did a training for them. But have an action plan and actually just print it out. And it's hanging on the inside of the door of the classroom that says, you are here, this is where you need to go in case of a fire, if you're able to exit the building. You are here, this is where you need to go in case of inclement weather or tornado, be in this space. Okay? Set up policies and procedures. Like when I was a teacher in public schools, both in Indiana and here, we had policies and procedures set place in case there wasn't an intruder. And part of that is that when something happened, then we were to step outside, look to see if there was anyone, if we could step outside our door, see what was going on, grab any students or adults that were outside of our room into our room, close our door, and then take a written attendance of who was in our room. Okay? Those are all things that you can think about through, sadly, because there was just a shooting just last week, I think, last Sunday, and it was a family thing where a brother came in and shot a brother and killed the pastor. And then other parts of premises. How are we going to handle the internet? Hopefully your internet is as bad as ours, and so they won't have to worry about it. Okay? But if you want good internet, you better have good protection also. Okay? Having open access is not wise. There are Safe Search, there's different programs that you can add to it and so on, firewalls that you can put up to have it locked down for inappropriate activity. I would ask, if you have internet access in your youth room, I would ask parents to sign off on whether their kids are allowed to get on the internet or not. Okay? We had a young man in our youth group who his mom said, well, he doesn't have a Facebook. Well, yes, he did. He set it up when he was at youth group because you said it was okay for him to get on the internet at youth group. Okay? And so we need to know those things if we want to be a part of that plan. Social media, have a plan and have a policy about that. I've got one that I'll put up in the Dropbox that came from somewhere else. But especially around, I always get questions about should the youth minister use their own Facebook for the youth group. And I always say no, have a youth group Facebook page, okay, or a youth group. Okay? That the youth minister is not the owner of that page. Okay? The church becomes the owner of that page. So that if youth ministry leaders change, that page can continue on. Okay? And then what do you do about photographs? Have parents sign a media release document that shares how they're going to let you use their child's photos. We use an app called Photo Circle. And if you come to Hands and Feet mission retreats before, then you know we use that, and we've used that there. So it's an app that you download to your phone, and you can invite who you want to be into that circle. And so those pictures can be those pictures are added to that circle by anyone that's been invited into that circle, and those pictures are stored in the cloud except on the person's phone who took the original. Okay? And so if I'm the administrator, like for Hands and Feet, I'm the administrator of those circles, and if I see someone that's posting inappropriate stuff, I can block that person and those pictures will be gone from that circle. It's also a good way to invite people from church into what's happening in the youth ministry. Say you're at Warmth and Winter or a mission trip or somewhere off-site and you want parents to see what the kids are experiencing, maybe sometimes maybe you don't. But you can invite them into that circle and they can see those photos there. Okay. What I use it for at Hands and Feet is that as churches are out serving and they're taking pictures, then I have access to those. I can download them. I can create the highlight video, and I don't have to go out. And if I can't get to every project site, I can download those pictures and then build the video from wherever I am.
So Brad?
Yep.
Did you say that is it accessible to only the people that you accept into the circle?
Yes, only the ones you invite into the circle. Yep. Yep. And whoever sets up the circle is the administrator of that circle. So.
We found out is those photographs that we needed to have built into our permission slip a place where it asks underneath safety issues, for example, order of protection.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And having a picture of that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because churches are open to anybody.
Yep.
And so you don't even walk in. We've had that twice actually.
Right.
And we keep those on file all the time. And anybody who works with those kids see that picture and know about it.
So if you have, she's saying to have an understanding family dynamics and domestic situations where you may have a divorce or a relationship issue where there's been a separation, that one parent or the other or a family member cannot have access to that child. So knowing that information is there and being aware of that. Okay. Sadly, we live in a world where that is increasing almost exponentially.
Is Does anyone know how to set up a church Facebook page without some person owning it?
If you have a church email, like an email, like let's say Mount Pleasant First at Gmail, it could be owned or administrator. You could do it that way. It'd have to be an email-based system, and you would set Mount Pleasant First basically as a person. Okay. But you have to have an email link to be able to set the Facebook
So
up.
that would be the person, then you'd set up the page.
Yeah.
They set up the page.
Yeah. All right. There's some good resources out there. One that's just come out from the Sticky Faith folks. Right-click Parenting Your Teenager in a Digital Media World. That's a new book that's just come out that you might look at as a source. And then a local artist that's involved here in Nashville with the Center for Youth Ministry Training, Andrew Zersky. When he was working on his doctorate, he wrote a long dissertation called Beyond the Screen. He presented it at a conference that I was at. Are you leaving? Let's say goodbye to Stephanie. She's going to fly back to Houston. Bye, Stephanie.
Have a happy birthday.
So Beyond the Screen, Youth Ministry for the Connected but Alone Generation. That research was amazing research that he presented to us, but he's put his dissertation into this book. And it's available. It actually came out from Abingdon Press, which is the publishing arm for youth ministry from the publishing house, United Methodist Publishing House. Okay? And so the process here, like we're doing this, you have to educate people. I talked about the need to educate everyone. Youth, children, youth, adults, parents, grandparents, staff persons. Be involved in the education process. Make sure that they understand why it is that we have to do this. You know, and one of the things that we do poorly sometimes is when we decide we have an event or we have something happening at youth ministry and we show up and we're the only adult that's there. And we say, well, we got to do this because these kids expect it to happen. And so beyond our best judgment, we go ahead and do it and we're the only person on site. Wrong. Okay? Don't do that. You got to say no to that. And I can tell you that it's just, for example, why do you have to say no? So we had, like I said, there were 3 churches who had signed up to be a part of this, and they all 3 asked if they could miss this one and then come to the next one, and they would do everything they could to catch up. And so we talked about it as a group, the coaching staff team and so on, and we all talked about it, and we were like, no, we want to value what we're doing. We have to say it's too important for you not to be there. And that's the same thing that we do sometimes. We do value our ministry when we violate policies and procedures because we think we have to do it and cut corners. Okay? We devalue it. We're training them to not step up when we say, we're going to do it anyway, even though there wasn't enough people here. Okay? And you have to explain to your kids that are in the ministry, you know, we're not going to be able to do this lock-in because we just don't have enough supervision for it to happen. I had to cancel our children's church program that we had here at Epworth back when I was the youth minister because parents would sign up to volunteer, and at the last minute they would drop out. And so it was constantly, it was either me or my wife or Debbie Hunter or another person on staff. But one of the 4 of us would have to be that second adult in the room, and so we were never in worship. But we'd have a ton of volunteers sign up, but at the last minute, they would drop out and think that by dropping out at the last minute, we would have to do children's church with somebody else, or somebody else would step in. And that was partly our fault, because the first few times that they dropped out at the last minute, we just stepped in and let it carry on. Well, it got to the point where we knew we were being taken advantage, and so we just said, look, if you're not going to step up and be consistent and volunteer, then we're not going to have this anymore. And so we canceled it, stopped doing it. And a few Sundays went by, this lady came up and she said, I'm ready to take my children to children's church. Where is it? And I said, well, we had to cancel it because we didn't have enough volunteers. And she got angry with me about that. And I just said back to her, I said, well, ma'am, I'm going to show you the calendar of every time you signed up and you chose not to show up. Well, I had things that had to happen. I said, well, virtually every time you signed up, you skipped out on us. And so you're part of the problem. So you'll have to keep your children in church. She did not like me after that point. Not sure she liked me very much before that. So again, train parents, adult volunteers, and you're going to train them on the policy, but you're also going to provide some training on the signs and symptoms of abuse. Okay? So let's talk about that real quick. What is physical abuse? Non-accidental physical trauma or injury inflicted by a parent or a caretaker or even possibly a peer as well. Peer-to-peer abuse is on the rise, folks. Okay? On a child. It also includes a parent's or caretaker's failure to protect the child from another person who perpetrated physical abuse on the child. In its most severe form, physical abuse is likely to cause great bodily harm or even death. Okay? Are you seeing some child that's constantly coming in with bruises all over? Are you seeing that? Think about it. Are you seeing some kid that's reluctant to step into a space where certain persons are? Why is that? Okay? What is neglect? Failure to provide for a child's physical survival needs to the extent that there is harm or risk of harm to that child's health or safety. It may include, but not limited to, abandonment, lack of supervision, lack of adequate nutrition that places the child below the normal growth curve, lack of shelter, lack of medical or dental care that results in health-threatening conditions, and the ability to meet basic clothing needs of children in its most severe form can create bodily harm and neglect. So are you seeing children coming in that obviously haven't been, they haven't bathed, they haven't, their clothes are out of control, and so on? They look like they haven't brushed their teeth ever, so on? Are they talking about how? I know Shelley in her line of work had a young little child came in and talked about how when she stayed at Daddy's house, she knew where Daddy would always leave his gun laying on the table, when he came in. And so, is that appropriate? Okay, no matter what your thoughts are on Second Amendment rights and so on, leaving a gun out on a table in view of a child, it might not be the best thing to do, right? And then, of course, sexual abuse is something that is the word that we often think about that Safe Sanctuaries prevents, but it is something that we have to think about because it happened in 2 situations within a 5-mile radius of here. Okay? That includes child pornography. That includes failure of a parent to take care of the child, to stop sexual abuse from happening if they know it's happening. And then the psychological harm that can come that happens from it. Repeated pattern of caregiver behavior or extreme incidents that convey to the children that they're worthless, flawed, unloved, unwanted, endangered, or only of value in meeting another's needs. And here's the thing that we have to understand. Tennessee is a mandatory reporter state. Okay? There's no religious exemption, ministerial exemption. You all serving in ministry fall into that category. And so reports have to happen. And so in the Tennessee conference and the Memphis conference, and probably in other conferences as well, if a situation occurs, you, of course, report it to the legal authority and then make sure that your pastor, if you haven't informed your pastor and they're not involved in the situation as the perpetrator, of course, you need to make sure the pastor knows. And then the pastor or yourself need to make sure the district superintendent knows so that person can then let the bishop know. And so that everyone is aware that needs to know what's happening. in case we have to respond in some way. Okay? But your first priority is to report it to the authorities. Okay? Don't try to hide it. It doesn't do any good to hide it.
This is anonymous reporting.
It's anonymous reporting, that's right. Yep. Anonymous reporting. If you suspect expect that something has happened, and I put an elderly person's picture up there because we often overlook elder abuse. Okay? But we have elderly who are in our churches that could potentially be abused as well. We have adults who are vulnerable that might have physical disabilities or other handicaps that might prevent them from being able to care for themselves fully, that are also vulnerable. But if you suspect something has occurred, remain calm. Okay? And speak calmly. Yes?
I had one time where I had a young youth gentleman that was in the youth group, and we suspected him of being abusive to his single mom. And oftentimes you don't think of that type of abuse, but we had that kind of turned around in the situation that we were worried about.
Yeah, where a young man was abusing his mom, his in a single parent situation. Okay? Speak calmly to them. Ask simple and direct questions. You're not investigating. You're not the investigator. Especially with children, investigators will tell you that the first time they tell their story is the most accurate time that they tell their story, because after they tell it that first time and people start asking them other questions, they tend to add things into their story that might not have possibly been there. And so your job is more to say, like, if your simple direct questions is who, so that you can keep them separate from that person. Where, so you can make sure that it's not still happening in that space. Don't ask how. Okay, you might ask when, but it's not for any more than you just making sure that it's not happening now. Okay, or that it can be prevented from happening now. Reassure them. Victims of abuse are often the first to blame themselves, or to justify for the person who was the abuser why it happened. But reassure them that it's not their fault, that they're not responsible for what this person did to them, that they are loved by God, and that we're going to be there as a church to help them through it. This is going to say, call OK DHS. Don't call Oklahoma's DHS. I did this training out in Oklahoma. Call the Tennessee Department of Children's Services or Health Services, depending on your area and what it is. But seek help. Okay, that's the key thing. Seek help. If you don't know the answer, then talk to your pastor and inform according to your organizational structure. That's what I was talking about before. Our organizational structure here in Tennessee is beyond the local church. Then the district superintendent needs to know. The district superintendent needs to inform the bishop. If you call the district superintendent and you don't get a hold of that person, then you call the bishop's office. Okay? That's part of our immediate crisis response plan, this crisis response process. We have resources in the conference. One of the areas that I'm connected to is the crisis response team. Okay? So say there's a situation that happens and your congregation needs support, pastoral support beyond what the pastor can give. Needs this outside perspective to come in to provide support and so on. That's what our conference response team is for. And they are all trained specifically to respond to situations like this. Okay? Some are pastors, some are doctors, some are psychologists, counselors, social workers. They all have had training in how to respond in situations. Okay? And yes?
I think you were contacted on our situation where the child began talking in youth group.
Yep.
Openly about it, and we were able, and that's a big thing with Safe Sanctuaries, because our numbers for volunteers were where they needed to be. We were able to safely remove him, not put him in a position where he was one-on-one and not leave the other group. And I know in that moment, you don't want, I'm going to tell you,
you don't know what's going on.
You've got a child here saying these things, and you want to react to that. And we couldn't, and that's, I guess that would be my one thing I would add to that is remain calm and remove the child if it's in
Yeah. Yeah. Remove the child, especially in the situation she's talking about. The child was disclosing the situation in front of the whole youth group, and appropriately pause that conversation from happening, and then separate that situation out, because the rest of those kids in the room, they don't need to hear. Not that because it's all that can happen from there is potentially more harm or potentially more gossip, rumors, different misunderstanding that's going on. So the best way the most appropriate way to pause is what I'm saying. Pause the conversation. Have the resources there that you can separate from the rest of the group so that story can be shared. But don't believe that you're in the investigative role in that story. And so in their situation, they called me to ask what to do next, and I gave them advice about the process to do next. And so upon discovering it, they found that it was a situation that had already been reported, and had already been investigated, and this young man was just remembering what had happened to him, and some lesson during youth group had made him remember that situation, right? So, all right. Yeah. Right. And so, one of the things that I want to skip through, because I'm a little bit over time, I'm going to take about 4 more minutes, and I want to talk about the concept of power. One of the situations that occurs oftentimes in ministry is that we really don't understand that we have power. That we're in a situation of without power. But just based upon your role in ministry, you have power. Okay? And depending on your level of degree or your level of appointment, your power changes as well. Okay? But the definition of power is if you have greater resources, meaning that you have more knowledge, more authority, more space in terms of making decisions and things like that, you have power. And the greater resources, the more power you have, the more potential for helping or hurting you have. Okay? And this goes into the concept of boundaries. How do we live this safe sanctuary process out? The person who is vulnerable is someone that has fewer resources, meaning that they don't have as much decision-making authority as you do in this situation. They don't have the knowledge necessarily that you have. Even though they may be somebody that has great power out in society, in the role of the church, you are in the position of ministerial leader or youth group leader, and so you have authority in that space, so they have the potential for being helped or hurt. And so when we believe our role is to fix a situation for another, that's when we've set ourselves up for a boundary crossing. When we believe that we're the only one that can handle a situation or fix a situation for a person, we've set ourselves up to cross a boundary. Okay? It's easy for us to do that. And thank goodness my wife has trained me so much on boundaries, appropriate boundaries, and just listening to her take calls at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, from parents. I had a situation one time where one of my youth kids on a leadership team attempted suicide, and the child had texted me multiple times on Super Bowl Sunday, and I just decided I was exhausted after North and Winter, and I left my phone upstairs away from where I was. And when I went to bed that night, I picked up my phone and saw like 4 text messages from the student, and the student said, "I need to talk to you. I'm feeling like I'm going to do something. I'm going to do, and so on." And those texts had come like 3 hours earlier, and by that time, the child had already attempted suicide, wasn't successful, or completed, or whatever you want to say. There's never success in suicide, right? Wasn't completed, thank God. But the person was at the hospital, and her parents later texted me and said, "Could you come to the hospital?" They wanted me to come to the hospital that night, and so I got dressed really fast, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, well, this happened and they want me to come to the hospital. She said, you cannot do anything there for them. Let the hospital people do their job. You can't fix that situation. Wait and go tomorrow. And so that's what I did. But, you know, in that moment, it's like, I got to go. You know, this child reached out to me, and then because I didn't respond, they attempted this. And so, what if? And she was not, you cannot change that situation. You cannot fix it. Let the professionals that are there to help that child deal with it. And so, my role in that afterwards was there wasn't anything I could do to fix or take back the attempt. But my role in it was to help them become more deeply connected to God. And to realize that God loves them. God cares for them. This junk that was going on in their lives is temporary. That we can deal with those temporary things and we can work through this situation. But their choice was to make a final choice to where there couldn't be anything done to work through the situation. And so that was the role that I played afterwards. I wasn't the fixer. I was trying to work towards connecting them more deeply to God. And so, and the other thing I'll say as we close, this is something that I've had to learn, especially in my time in ministry in the conference office, is that this God's saying this to me, you are not God, I am, and even I took a day off. Meaning that we think we have to work all the time. We think that we have to be on call. We're really good at talking and preaching about the Sabbath, but I can almost guarantee you that most of us are horrible about Sabbath. And so I had to start examining myself in this way, asking myself these kind of questions. How can I care for others if I don't care for myself? How can I keep, in this situation, boundaries become more easily crossed when we think we must sacrifice ourselves to save others? And then there's a good reason why they tell us to put our oxygen mask on first on a plane, right? You can't help somebody else get theirs on if you're passed out. So you got to put yours on first. Breathe in, breathe out. Take care of yourself. Make sure you're healthy so that you can help someone else be healthy. And so for me, my goal is to take Mondays off. If I making at least one day off during the week where it's not that Sunday, because we work on Sundays often, right? The ministry, we're working on Sundays. So what day of the week can you take off? Can you shut out everything but your family and just be present in the space you're in and do that? And I invite you to come and learn how I take Sabbath, which I'm going to do Monday in my stained glass studio. In April, we have a youth minister Sabbath retreat at Cedar Crest, and I'm going to teach you some basics of stained glass. You may come out of there and think, good Lord, how could he ever do that as a Sabbath practice? Because it's hard, or it's frustrating, or I cut myself multiple times. Yes, you do all that stuff. But for me, I can go in that space and separate from everything else and just focus on what it is that I'm supposed to create in that time. And so that's how I do it. Because I don't want to be on this list. Okay? I don't want the next person that does this kind of training and Google Youth Minister mugshots and mine be up there. Because it's, when you're in this identity that you're the one that can fix everything, then it's very easy for you to cross into spaces that you never thought you'd be into before. You got to take care of your soul. You got to take time to refuel. You got to take time to decompress. You got to take time to share what you're concerned about with the people that you work with, and especially the people who care for you and you care with as well. Because I wonder how many of these people found themselves on the other side and just like, how in the world, how God did this happen? And God's reminding them, you remember that time that you chose not to take that break? You remember that time that you thought you could fix that child instead of letting that child be cared for by somebody that knew how to do it better than you? Remember that time where you thought you were the only one that could be the youth minister of that church or those kids? Remember that time that you chose not to to cancel that event because nobody else showed up? Remember that time? You know, these things, we have to take care of ourselves because ministry is not it's not a sprint, you know. It is a everyday thing that you have to take care of. It's an everyday situation. If you want to be called to ministry for the long haul, then you have to take steps to get you there. And that's just one step. Okay, I watched Creed last night. It was like one step, one punch. How many of you saw the movie Creed? Rocky was his coach, right? Okay, it wasn't a great movie, but there's some great lines in it. And that was one thing that I could take out of it. It's like for me in ministry, I've got to take one step at a time, not try to get there too fast, and make sure that along the way I'm training and doing the things I have to do to be able to take the next step. And that means I have to take care of myself. And I have to take care of my family as well. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to just, before we close out, your coaches are going to gather you in groups. We're going to make sure we have your contact information that we want to share Google Drive with. We want to make sure that you have time to just, any questions that you might have, any comments that you want to add, you can do that with them. I'm going to pray right now, and then we'll dismiss it in about 10 minutes, and you all are free to go. And make sure that you take your books with you, your binders with you. And then what we'll do is make sure that we get these videos uploaded for you to share with other people in your youth group. There's some other slides that I didn't go through in this process that are up in Google Drive. And if you need somebody to come to your church and do a training on risk management, healthy boundaries, safe sanctuaries, just let me know. We'll do that. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for the day. We thank you for these churches, these people that are called to serve you and to serve their communities. And God, we just ask you to help us be reminded that you are the creator and the fixer, that we just get to serve along with you. That you'll do the miracles through us if we allow you to do them instead of us trying to do them ourselves. That we'll take care of ourselves and take care of each other. That we'll put to practice the things that we're learning. We'll ask questions when we have questions. And we'll share in ministry with each other and with our churches and our members and our congregations so that everyone knows that they are called to ministry to those that are being brought to them into that space, into that community. And so as we depart here, God, may we travel home safely and be prepared for another day of ministry tomorrow and the weeks to come. In Christ's name, amen. So coaches are going to gather with you just for a decompress time, talk about a few takeaways and any questions that you might have.